Thank you, and great to be here. Anyone in this room that's responsible for getting insight into customer or experience or employee feedback data from, surveys or support center or other sources like that, I'm willing to bet that you're probably doing one of three things right now. Number one, you're just ignoring the qual component because there's too much data and it's just too hard to get insight into it. And instead you're focusing on the quant component only, which is fair enough. Number two, you are manually coding that data and spending hours and hours, either on a weekly or monthly basis, applying those tags and getting that understanding. Or number three, you are using a solution that comes bundled in with your survey software or your customer experience management software. And you are still doing some level of manual processing of that data because either the insights that you're getting out are not very insightful, they're surface level, or you're worried that you're missing something very important in the data that the technology isn't picking up. And we live in a world right now where I can pull out my phone and order groceries from my couch without ever standing up. But somehow in 2022, the most reliable way we have to get insight to qual data is manual coding and manual processing, which I think is absolutely crazy. Why are we here? The existing solutions that exist in this space, they try to make manual coding more efficient. And they use technology that's 10 years old now to try and do that. And I think it's a perfectly reasonable solution at the time. In these systems, you have to preload in some tags or codes that you want the system to go and find, and then you have to train these systems to go and find those codes. And that setup process usually takes in the order of weeks to months. If you don't want to go through that pain, you have to use the tags or the codes that the vendor gives you based on the industry that you're in. There's a whole bunch of problems with this, but I think perhaps the most pertinent one is I didn't know an insights or a research practitioner that had a coronavirus code prior to 2020. And so guess what? They had to go back through that setup process and teach the system how to find coronavirus. And then when we started calling it COVID, I had to do that again. And then when we started calling it Delta, I had to do it again. Then when we started calling it Omicron, I had to do it again. You get the point, right? Insights and research practitioners are desperately worried that the technology isn't picking up important things that it hasn't been pre-trained or coded to go and find. And so they're resorting back to manually processing the data because they don't want to be responsible for delivering insights to the business that are incorrect or miss major components that they should have covered. Now, as was mentioned at the top, I've got 15 years of experience in natural language processing and artificial intelligence. And I think there is a better way to solve this problem. Instead of trying to solve this problem from the point of view of how do we make manual coding more efficient, an inherently human approach, what if we started from the point of view of how could machines solve this problem using the strengths of machines? And it turns out, as you're probably all well aware, machines can crunch large amounts of data very quickly, and they're very good at pattern matching. The technology exists today to model languages very efficiently and quickly identify the themes that people are talking about. What if we use this technology to try and solve the problem? And this is probably not to your surprise, exactly the approach that Kapiche takes. In Kapiche, you can take tens of thousands of pieces of unseen customer or employee feedback data from support center, surveys, socials, wherever, and in minutes, without any prior setup, without any pre-training, identify what are the salient themes that customers or employees are talking about. How do they feel about these themes? How does this differ across different segments? And how does it impact the behaviors that we care about? Using technology like this gives hours and hours of time back to insights and research practitioners to do the more important work, which is the so what and what is the insight that I need to deliver to the business. Now, if you missed it in the intro, you certainly haven't missed it in my accent. I'm definitely not from the United States. I'm from Australia, and the company started in Australia. Insights and research teams from all of Australia's biggest companies use Kapiche as their chosen insights and research platform. They connect in their support center data, their social data, their survey data, their live chat data, all into the one platform and use Kapiche to identify insights in real time and deliver those insights in the moment to business teams that need to have them, and also power their existing reporting workflows on things like NPS and CSAT that go off to management or the board. And also, as we mentioned at the top, we started in Australia, but we're now more recently looking to expand into North America. And we've been very fortunate to sign Nextdoor as one of our first customers. And Miriam has very graciously agreed to come here today and share what Nextdoor are doing inside their research team. So I'm going to hand over to Miriam.
Hi. Before I start, I just want to say that I'm nursing a bit of a sore throat. It's not COVID, don't worry. It's just a cold. So I'm going to talk kind of softly, and I hope that my voice doesn't like put you all into a post-lunch nap. So as Ryan said, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've been using Kapiche and the feedback analytics engine that they have. For those of you who aren't familiar with Nextdoor, Nextdoor is the neighborhood network. So Nextdoor is where you can connect to neighbors that matter to you so you can belong, and users around the world use Nextdoor to get trusted information, give and get help, and build real world connections where they live in their location. We are in over 290,000 neighborhoods worldwide, and almost 1 in 3 US households currently use Nextdoor. So let me tell you a little bit about where we started when Kapiche came onto the scene. We had, hello, thank you. We had mountains of text feedback. We have millions and millions of people using Nextdoor every day across 11 countries. And our neighborhood operations team would, as Ryan kind of described, be trying to tag and hand code all of this feedback. We also have been diligently fielding an NPS survey, a Net Promoter Score survey, for years. And we also had another giant mountain of feedback from that. And with that feedback, honestly, we had no way to deal with it. We just did not have the manpower. No one was coding it. It was just sitting there. So that wasn't great. Now, this is the NPS survey that we field, and this is where we are using Kapiche to help us with feedback analytics. So it has the standard NPS question that you all know and love. And then we also add these 2 additional questions that relate to Nextdoor's purpose of building a kinder world where everyone has a neighborhood that they can rely on. The first question is, how would you describe the tone of conversation in your Nextdoor community? And the second one is, how disappointed would you be if you could no longer use Nextdoor? And those 2 questions are going to come into play later on in the presentation. So the way we field the survey is pretty straightforward. Each week we send it by email, and we send it to 0.5% of the neighbors who use Nextdoor with a couple of criteria, kind of basic criteria like these. Okay, so what happens next? We collect the survey data in SurveyMonkey. We store it in our data lake so that we can, use it later for other kinds of analyses. Then we clean it up, dedupe it, put it into a nice format that we can store in S3. And then we send it to Kapiche. Kapiche actually can download it from there and put it into the analytics engine. And then it comes back to us in a dashboard, as well as in the form of all kinds of insights, which we can use. I think the thing that's important to note about this whole kit and caboodle here is that it's automatic and continuous. So the scripts are written, and each week it just goes. So we always have the latest data that we can look at. Now, before I jump into the 3 examples I want to share, I just want to take a brief moment to commiserate with some of the challenges that product teams face when they have mountains of text feedback, even if that feedback is coded or tagged in some way. So as was mentioned in my intro, I was in product for a really long time before I made the kind of joyful jump over to research. So I have experience being on the receiving end of insights, as well as now delivering them to product teams. So some of the challenges that product teams face are that, the stuff is amorphous, right? Like you get this big mountain of feedback and you're thinking, well, which ones of these things do users really care about? What does it really mean? And it's just hard to kind of drill down and get to the bottom of it and figure out how you're going to apply it to your product. The next issue is that you can't size the stuff when you get it in, just a mountain of text feedback. You don't know how many users does it impact really. You don't know if it's connected to a metric that the company really cares about. And so when you can't size something, it makes it really easy as a product team to kind of deprioritize it and kind of brush it aside. And the next problem, especially in startup land, which is where I've worked most of my career, actually really all of my career, is that you need to move on, right? So maybe you shipped your product, maybe you missed your ship date by a couple of weeks. You know, your product shipped late and the next thing on your roadmap is already breathing down your neck. You got to get to it. And so it's really easy when you've got some bugs that are coming in or this stuff that's coming in through text feedback, which might feel anecdotal, to say, well, you know, we got to triage that. Let's just triage that, make it a priority 3, and we'll come back to it in phase 2. Like, have you ever heard of that? Like phase 2, does phase 2 ever actually happen? No, right. So these are problems that product teams face when they're faced with this, you know, text feedback. And so keep in mind as we go through, because this whole process of identifying the problem, being able to quantify it, and then deeply understanding it so that you can prioritize it has really come into play. And this feedback analytics engine has really helped us with some of these challenges. The other thing I wanted to mention is what I call the problem of the baby and the bricks. So the problem of the baby and the bricks is that the baby is really attracted to shiny new objects like disco balls. So, you know, shiny new objects are exciting, they're glamorous, they're filled with possibility. The bricks over here, ignored, are boring, mundane, but they might be the things that are really crushing your users. So when I sat down to think about it, I really realized that this process of identifying, quantifying, understanding the importance of these user-driven themes, the stuff that emerges out of the data, that is where the baby can start to focus a little bit on the bricks. Does that make sense? Am I seeing a few nods out there with this kind of tortured metaphor? So yes, so keep those things in mind. Okay, the first example I want to share with you is about login. So one of the things that came out of the data of the feedback analytics was that login was becoming an issue. And so basically what was happening was there was a problem for users that was happening before they even got into Nextdoor. We had a team that was working on some issues like security and safety issues like two-factor authentication. And that work was really great. We were getting great results out of that work. But what we didn't realize was that what we thought of as small bugs in that kind of around the fringes of that work were actually creating big problems. So when we saw this emerge out of the data, and we saw that it was having this, you know, significantly negative impact on NPS. So it was dragging down NPS by 2.3 points. Like, that's a lot. And the theme itself of login had a really negative NPS. So we thought, okay, now we can quantify this, we can size it. This is something that makes us sit up and take notice, right? Then we could take those themes. So login emerges as the theme. And then from the theme of login, we can drill down into the sub-themes that are connected. And we can find the verbatims that are connected to those sub-themes. So it helps us kind of pick the needles out of the haystack in terms of what the real issues are. So for example, you know, my password is rejected and invalid. I used to come to Nextdoor several times a day. Now I've given up. Oh my God, this like is a dagger to the heart of a product team. This person was coming to Nextdoor several times a day and now they can't even get in the front door. The next one, you know, when I get the numeric passcode, two-factor authentication, on email, it always says expired. Oh, okay, there's this expired issue. So what we were able to realize was that these things, which were bugs that were triaged somewhere way down on some list, were actually the things that were driving this real negative issue that was really bugging our users. Additionally, With the feedback analytics, it could show us where this problem was happening. For us, this problem was happening mainly on iOS. So we could see that for iOS, there's a much greater likelihood that people who are complaining about login in their NPS feedback are using iOS as a platform. So now the team can actually start to focus on where they need to pay attention. And it saves a lot of time because they don't need to necessarily look at all the other platforms. They can just focus first on iOS and know that that's going to have the biggest impact. And I will also add that in this case, we didn't actually have a login team because we didn't perceive it to be a big issue. We just weren't really looking at it. We were looking at all kinds of other things. And then we were able to go, commandeer the resources to go look at this problem, address it, and make Nextdoor into the welcoming platform that we really want it to be. Now, the next example I'm going to give you is about ease of use. So login, it's actually really it's different from the login issue because in some ways and similar in others. So the way it's different is that login is kind of a contained universe, right? Kind of small. Ease of use is the opposite. It's like as big as the ocean. But in both of them, this process of identifying, quantifying, understanding, and prioritizing really comes into play. So the problem with ease of use is that it's just so vague. If you bring information to a product team and say, hey, users are complaining about ease of use. We have some ease of use issues. I think probably two things might happen. For one thing, it's not shiny. It is so not shiny. I mean, what you're probably going to hear is, oh, every product has problems with ease of use. That's just life in technology. And that wouldn't be untrue. But people get inured to the issue because it is so common. The other thing about ease of use is it's just really amorphous. So it's really hard to know where to start, like what part of this elephant to start trying to, I don't know where to go with the elephant, but anyway, you know what I mean. So now when you take something really amorphous like this, and then you can again quantify it and say, oh my gosh, this is having like an almost 0.5 drag on our NPS, and it itself has a very low NPS. So people who are upset about ease of use are really not happy. So again, that makes you sit up and take notice and say, okay, how are we going to figure this out? And with these emergent sub-themes, we can dig in and figure out what's really going on. So with ease of use in our case, it might be different in your cases, but it turned out that what users were really concerned about was navigation, right? Navigation was connected in the sub-themes. Now, if I were to take navigation, I'd be, oh, great. Now I know it's not just ease of use, it's navigation. And so I take that to the design team and I say, guess what? We're having issues with navigation. They're going to be like, oh, great. Let's redo our nav bar. Let's redo our sidebar. You know what? That's not what users were complaining about. When users were talking about navigation, they weren't talking about the nav bar. Turns out what they were really talking about when we got to go into the verbatims that were connected to these sub-themes were two things that we really were not aware of. We just weren't paying attention to this. So one was finding posts that they had seen and were interested in and wanted to find again, right? So difficult to navigate, difficult to search for past posts, or it's hard to find even your own posts and posts I've previously viewed that I'm interested in. So now that's something really specific that the design and product team can start to work on. We would not have known that that was an issue. We wouldn't have known that it was an issue that mattered. Second thing, categorization. So on Nextdoor, there are a lot of different things talked about. It's everything from, your lost dog to a yard sale to there's a meeting with the local board of supervisors to, do you know where the best, Burmese food is around here? All different kinds of things. So users were saying, it's hard to navigate and find my way around to locate different umbrella subjects, or are there categories or some way to sort this? So these two very specific things emerged from this amorphous blob of ease of use. And again, we were able to have people start to chip away at this issue. All right, so these are the first two examples. And I think you can see how this identifying it, being able to quantify it, to size the impact of it so that you know it's worth working on, and then to dive in more deeply and understand the nuance. And then, then that allows you to prioritize rather than to triage it out of existence. This process applies to both of these problems that we found. Now, the next third final example I'm going to give you is different because these are problems that we weren't focused on and that the feedback analytics engine allowed us to see and to focus on. The next thing is not about what our neighbors were unhappy about with Nextdoor. It's about what do neighbors love about Nextdoor. So what neighbors love about Nextdoor, it turns out, is community and information. The feedback's analytic engine not only can tell us what to fix, but it can also tell us what to lean into. What are we doing right that we should do more of? And I think that's really powerful when you bring it to product teams because, it can be disheartening to get like, oh, you got to fix this, you got to fix that, you got to fix this, you got to fix that. But if as an insights team, you can come and say, and you know what you're doing well, what's really working is this, do more of this. Well, that's a place that can be really inspiring for a product team to hear. So for us, with community, one of the things that came out of the feedback analytics was that users who were referencing community in their feedback were almost twice as likely, almost double the expected likelihood of being really bummed out if they could no longer use Nextdoor. So what that tells us is that, well, let me take a step back. So I don't know about your organizations, but everywhere that I've worked has had some pretty lofty and aspirational goals, a purpose, a mission, for us at Nextdoor to cultivate a world where everyone has a neighborhood they can rely on. Well, that's great, but we don't really know if that's the experience of our users. Is that what people who are using the product really feel? And moreover, is it something that matters to them? Do they care about it? So what we saw from the feedback analytics was that actually, yes, community is something that people love. And when they experience that on Nextdoor, it makes them love Nextdoor and it makes Nextdoor an integral and important part of their lives. So that's really motivating for the teams internally, right? Secondly, information. So in this case, I gave Nextdoor a 10 because of all the useful information. Homeowners can find how to handle questions, et cetera, solves many problems that pertain to the town they live in. Well, this one, we could see that the theme of information has a great NPS, over 42. And it has a positive impact on overall NPS of almost 11. So not only that, it's the second most frequently mentioned theme after neighborhood. So this tells us that the things, again, that neighbors care about are relating to our mission and our purpose, right? Our mission is to be the neighborhood hub for trusted connection and the exchange of helpful information, goods and services. And this relates to those two other questions that we added on to the NPS survey, the one about the tone of your community and how bummed out, says how disappointed would you be if you could no longer use Nextdoor? So knowing, what you're doing right and knowing if and how it relates to your aspirational goals of your company is a really powerful thing. And that's the third example I wanted to share with you. Okay, so now we've got all these great insights. And what are we going to do with them? Are we going to just sit around in our research group and our insights group and say, wow, this is great? No, we have to share them. We have to socialize them. We have to bring them out. We have to wring all the goodness out of them. So what we do at Nextdoor is we do a quarterly deep dive analysis, and then we share it as much and as often as we can. We share it to the executive team. We share it to the teams that are related to the issues that emerge. We do have a bi-weekly cross-functional learning meeting where people from around the company share things that they've learned. We present it there. We present it at the all hands. We have a weekly all hands meeting. We put it in all company emails that go out. And we also put it on our actually really highly utilized internal research website. And I really think that the more you socialize, like it's never a one and done with this kind of analysis. We really milk it. So I just close saying that the story of the feedback's analytic engine at Nextdoor is a little bit a story of the baby and the bricks. Working in this way, identifying, quantifying, understanding, it kind of helps us. It helps us help the baby resist the lure of the disco ball a little bit and put a little bit of its attention onto those important, if a little more mundane bricks. And the very last thing I want to share is that at Nextdoor in general, and in the Insights team in particular, we are hiring. So thank you.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank you everyone for having us.